All right, so I actually had recorded this video, but the audio wasn't working. So sadly, you're not going to see me kind of write out every line of code, but I'm going to go ahead and just read through each script and how things work. So as of right now, this is where we left off last time, where we have a welcome panel here, and then we have all these subsequent panels, including a countdown timer. Now, the logic of our game is I'm thinking like we'll make a really nice like welcome screen and it'll slide down like that. And then once it finishes sliding down, there'll be a start button that appears and then we'll click start. And then, because remember, we're playing with states here. Once we click start, we'll have like a 3D tank like slide in, or maybe it'll slide forward or something cool. We'll figure something out. And then that's where we'll see like our aliens come in. And then our countdown timer will update that. So it's like 3, 2, 1, and then the battle can begin. So let's take a look at our scripts, and I'm gonna try to be as meticulous as possible because I already scripted these three out, and yeah. Okay, so essentially the top part of this is the same. So just kind of be a little bit meticulous, like open your game manager and check through it. Again, forgive me, I usually jump between the different scripts and show you how all the logic works. I'm gonna do my best to do that here. So make sure that you have these two serialized fields, and all these do is give us access to the UI manager and then the countdown timer. And then we have this variable here called game state, and we're using that to access these different states. So we have this kind of structure here where we have these different states here. And then we have current state here, which will help us. We can use it to access the different states. And we do that by simply typing like current state and then dot, and then we have all these different states. And enumerated enums are they're not hard to understand. Really, this is it. This is the whole structure of it. You have a bunch of like words with commas. So don't let that scare you. So in our start method, we set the game state to gamestate.intro, which if you remember, we typed that out down here. And all it's doing is right now we're starting our game at intro. And intro is going to be that main menu sliding down and then the button appears. We haven't coded any of that yet, so don't worry. And then we go to our UI manager and we're calling a method that's inside of our UI manager here called setState. Now, this state here is a switch case statement. So right off the bat, when we call this method, we hide our panel. So we really could just delete this. I'm going to go ahead and do that now because we're calling it right away. So we hide all of our panels. And then the state that we're switching to is based on this thing being constantly called. Now, all our UI manager does at this point is we have a bunch of panels. And then at the very beginning, we hide all of our panels, including our timer. And then we have a method here that contains this switch statement that just takes in whatever the current state is. So we can keep calling this from all of our different scripts to whatever the state is, and that just sets the panels on. Now, we don't have anything setting them off, and we'll get into that later. And then the last method that's in here is really, I went ahead and I changed this to public, so make sure to type public here. But it's an update countdown timer, and all it does is it takes in the time that's left, and then it takes that time that's left, which is here. And remember, whenever we're feeding text into a UI, it shows up as letters. So we have to convert the integer value into a letter to show it on the screen. So back in our game manager, we have our set game state method here. So it's pretty, it looks pretty good so far. I'm going through here, but this is sort of new too. So inside of our start method, remember start is like right away, it just gets activated. We're setting our game state to intro, and then we're going to check if we have a countdown timer, we're going to subscribe to its events. Do you remember that there's two things? We have an on countdown tick here, which is a event, right? We created these two events here. They're Unity events. On countdown tick can take in a number, and on countdown finished is its own thing. Now, events have two things. Events are invoked, which means once we invoke this, we have listeners, which are these two here. A listener just checks if it's invoked. So let's kind of run through this. Bear with me for a second. we have this countdown timer here on countdown finished, and we're listening for when it's finished. So how do we know when this finishes? So I'm going to hit F12 on this, and this works even in Visual Studio. And it takes me to where this is first created, which is here. And then I'm going to hit F12 again and just look for, see, remember this is our on countdown finished. And remember, we're accessing this through our countdown timer. So we're actually accessing this. So we go to our countdown timer, we created it here, but where is it being invoked? You can see if I highlight over here, it says usage. If I go down here, you can see that on countdown time finished is also down here. If our countdown timer is less than or equal to 0, remember our update function is really just, if you remember from before, we round the time. This means it's started. And then here, if once our timer hits less than or equal to 0, we're going to invoke this, which means this gets called. So inside of start, we're going to check, did our countdown timer finish? And if it did, we're going to do something called a lambda, which is really just an expression. And it looks like this. And all it's saying is, if this is true, which means our countdown timer has been called or invoked, we're just going to set the game state to playing. And so all that's saying is like we have 3, 2, 1, do, and then we're going to go to our playing, which is going to be like our tanks rolling in or our character or whatever. And if you remember, set game state is this right here in the UI. It's this switch case statement we created in the UI manager, which is here. Hopefully that wasn't too confusing. I mean, take notes as you go through this. And briefly, really that's it for this video. And this is kind of the complete game manager. We are going to be adding things like when I click a button, I'm going to add that logic in here to switch the state. But for now, that's really what the next video is this updated game manager. What we're going to be doing in the next video is taking a break from a lot of coding and just focusing on animating some UIs and doing things, learning a lot of new, really cool advanced stuff, which again, as I mentioned, the more you do this, the easier and the more familiar it gets.